Happy day, Internet. My name is John, and this is my channel, The Intermancer. This isn't going to be the best video, but it's going to be my first. Let me show you something I've been working on. This is the GAIA-F core project on my Intermancer page at github.com. As you can see from the About section here, this is the third version of my genetic algorithm project, which I have been working on for decades. The previous two versions, as you can see here, were called the Predictor. Predictor was the original, and then Predictor 2, where I started over from scratch and I wanted to learn some AWS stuff, and I made a lot of progress, but then I hit a brick wall at an optimization problem, and this has languished for quite some time. Enter generative AI coding, and I thought I will try to do this again, and I will do it in public because today's job market is broken and one must get attention where one can. So GAIA-F core is my third attempt to create a genetic algorithm project or genetic algorithm framework. As you can see here, right now, it is pretty empty. I'll tell you a story of how we got here shortly, but right now I want to show you where all we're starting from. This GAIA-F core application tests and GAIA-F core application class are the default classes or default code that came with the boilerplate application that was generated for me. I've created Gen AI context where I have created a single document describing some of the early domain objects that we'll be creating. Now, here's the deal. Like I said, I'm experimenting out in public. And what I'm experimenting with is super prompt, single shot Gen AI coding, which is different from most of the AI coding examples that you see on YouTube. Most AI coding examples are using Copilot, which I will be using. Here's my Visual Studio Code, fully Copilot enabled. That same project we were just looking at over on GitHub is right here with my Markdown preview. Now I want to close that. So I will be using Copilot where appropriate, but my emphasis is going to be more on giving it a context, like this document here, and then asking it to generate big chunks of code. That's what we're going to do on the second video. For the remainder of this video, I want to talk about how I got to where I'm at here now, because I sometimes get frustrated with how difficult these quote-unquote enabling technologies can be. Let me share something with you. I figured that setting up a project was the perfect place for me to start using Copilot. And here was my first chat. You can see that I started off completely and utterly undetailed. I said, create a GitHub project called GAIA-F core. I knew the name. I knew in my head what I wanted to do, but I figured let's just see what a basic GitHub project looks like. And honestly, I expected it to just create an empty project out on GitHub. But what it did is it said, well, here's an idea for a workspace. And I said, okay, that actually makes sense. I should be focusing local instead of focusing on my project over on my repository on GitHub first. I should first work on setting up an initial workspace here. So I said, okay, you're right. That's fair. I didn't give you enough detail. It needs to be a Gradle project for a Spring Boot web app. So I'm going to be using Java. I like Spring Boot, and I've been using Gradle at work, so that's what I know. It said, okay, here you go. Here's a bunch of stuff. And I said, you know what? Look at that. I appreciate everything you're doing, but I still haven't given you enough information. You can see because this is still COM example GAIA-F core, which is an ugly package. So instead, what we'll do is we'll say, instead of COM example GAIA-F core, replace everything with COM Intermancer GAIA-F core. And it said, you know what, fam, gotcha. And so it said, I'm going to redo everything just like we talked about. I'm going to add a bunch of stuff in here. I'm going to give you an idea what the build.gradle will look like. And here's some project information. Here's some test classes and your controller and your application. And I said, hey, that's all great. But just real quick, let's do Java version 21 and Spring Boot version 3.4.3. And it says, okay, here's that Gradle that we had with those corrections. And I had said, you know what? That's exactly what I wanted. Where does it say? Here it is, 3.4.3, 21. And we were off. I said, okay, and told me everything else. And he said, create that workspace. And it gave me this thing. And you know what? This is on me. This is on me. Because I probably should have done this button. Is this edit with Copilot? No. Execute in terminal? I don't know what I could have done. I didn't notice that when I said create that workspace, the suggestion it gave me was this one way back at the top. Not the first one, the second one. It created this second workspace just like this and ignored all of this other stuff that it talked about with me. So what I did is I went through and recreated this cool workspace that had all the changes that we had talked about, although I also had to create this source sets to get this Visual Studio Code to recognize my package appropriately. What it was doing initially, it had this GAIA-F core application class that you see here, and it was giving me an error on line 1. It was saying unrecognized package com.intermancer. It said expected main Java com intermancer GAIA-F core. And that's why I ended up putting these source sets in my Gradle, even though this is totally the industry standard conventions. And that didn't fix my problem. Honestly, I was getting ready to rename the directory to hide it from any hidden Visual Studio Code directories and start moving things over one at a time because I had already rebooted everything a few times. But finally, one day, yesterday, in fact, for some reason, when I started everything up, it finally had fixed that compilation error. And it was saying, no, you're good, fam. I committed after that. I haven't really looked at anything in detail since. And what we have is pretty much the default, except I did do a little bit of housekeeping over here on README. So, that is my story. I have yet to see the magic of the Copilot coding. I might get there. I don't see it yet, though. Thank you.